Sometimes I'll be driving on a long, weaving road across marshland, or maybe past rows of furrowed fields, the sky big and gray and never changing mile after mile, and I find I'm thinking about my essay, the one I was supposed to be writing back then, when we were at the cottages. This is where they arrive at the cottage farm. Even Ruth looked daunted. That sunny day, the minibus dropped us in front of the farmhouse, circled round the little pond and disappeared up the slope. We could see hills in the distance that reminded us of the ones in the distance at Halesham, but they seemed to us oddly crooked, like when you draw a picture of a friend and it's almost right but not quite, and the face on the sheet gives you the creeps. But at least it was the summer, not the way the cottage would get a few months on, with our little puddle frozen over and the rough ground frosted bone hard. The place looked beautiful and cozy, with overgrown grass. When I think about my essay today, what I do is go over it in some detail. I may think of a completely new approach I could have taken, or about different writers and books I could have focused on. I might be having coffee in a service station, staring at the motorway through the big windows, and my essay will pop into my head for no reason. Then I quite enjoy sitting there, going through it all again. Old Man Keffers. Keffers was this grumpy old guy who turned up 2 or 3 times a week in his muddy van to look the place over. He didn't like to talk to us much, and the way he went around sighing and shaking his head disgustedly implied we weren't doing nearly enough to keep the place up. It's cold at the cottages. I remember a lot of the time, outside the summer months, being chilly. You went around with 2 or even 3 jumpers on, and your jeans felt cold and stiff. We sometimes kept our Wellingtons on the whole day, leaving trails of mud and damp through the rooms. Kefers, observing this, would again shake his head.
It's funny now recalling the way it was at the beginning, because when I think of those 2 years at the cottages, that scared, bewildered start doesn't seem to go with any of the rest of it. If someone mentions the cottages today, I think of easygoing days drifting in and out of each other's rooms, the languid way the afternoon would fold into evening, then into night, and I think of my pile of old paperbacks, their pages gone wobbly like they'd once belonged to the sea. I think about how I read them lying on my front in the grass on warm afternoons. My hair, which I was growing long then, always falling across my vision. I think about the mornings waking up in my room at the top of the Black Barn to the voices of students outside in the field arguing about poetry or philosophy, or the long winters, the breakfast in the steamed up kitchens, meandering discussions around the table about Kafka or Picasso. It was always stuff like that at breakfast. Never who you'd had sex with the night before, or why Larry and Helen weren't talking to each other anymore. If we were honest, though particularly near the beginning, most of us would have admitted missing the Guardians. A few of us for a time even tried to think of Kefras as a sort of guardian, but he was having none of it. You went up to greet him when he arrived in his van, and he'd stare at you like you were mad. But this was one thing we'd been told over and over, that after Halesham, there'd be no more guardians, so we'd have to look after each other. And by and large, I'd say Halesham prepared us well on that score. We could do pretty much everything we wanted to without getting told off now. There was incidentally something I noticed about these veteran couples at the cottages, something Ruth, for all her close study of them, failed to spot. And this was how so many of their mannerisms were copied from the television. It first came to me watching this couple, Susie and Greg, probably the oldest students at the cottages and generally thought to be in charge of the place. There was this particular thing Susie did whenever Greg set off one of his speeches about Proust or whoever. She'd smile at the rest of us, roll her eyes, and mouth very emphatically, but only just audibly. "God help us," she would say. Ruth quickly picked up on some of these things the veterans did, and began imitating the oldest couple. They did this thing where you slapped your partner's arm near the elbow, lightly with the back of your knuckles, to say goodbye instead of embraces and kisses.
Ruth, I've been meaning to ask you, why do you always hit Tommy on the arm like that when you're saying goodbye? You know what I mean.
I didn't realize I was doing it. I must have just picked it up.
It's not something worth copying. It's not what people really do out there in normal life, if that's what you were thinking.
So what? A lot of us do it.
What you mean is Chrissy and Rodney do it.
So that's it. That's what's been upsetting poor little Kathy. Ruth isn't paying enough attention to her. Ruth's got big new friends, and baby sister isn't getting played with so often.
Stop all that. Anyway, that's not how it works in real families. You don't know anything about it.
Oh, Kathy, the great expert on real families. So sorry. But that's what this is, isn't it? You've still got this idea. Us Halesham lot. We have to stay together. A tight little bunch must never make any new friends.
I've never said that. I'm just talking about Chrissy and Rodney. It looks daft, the way you copy everything they do.
But I'm right, aren't I? You're upset because I've managed to move on, make new friends. Some of the veterans hardly remember your name. You never talk to anyone unless they're Halesham.
Never mind me. Never mind Halesham. But you keep leaving Tommy in the lurch. I watched you. You've done it a few times this week. You leave him stranded, looking like a spare part. That's not fair. You and Tommy are supposed to be a couple. That means you look out for him.
Quite right, Kathy. We're a couple. Like you say. And if you must intrude, I'll tell you. We've talked about this, and we've agreed. If he sometimes doesn't feel like doing things with Chrissy and Rodney, that's his choice. I'm not going to make him do anything he's not yet ready for. But we've agreed he shouldn't hold me back. Nice of you to be concerned, though. Come to think of it, I suppose you haven't been that slow making friends with at least some of the veterans.
I realized I made a mistake.